Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Or I'm saying welcome back to me because I have put my podcast and some of my social media activity on pause for a little while. You've probably seen me out there a little bit in the last few months, but for the most part, I've been on pause. Those two little lines next to each other, pause. And the reason for that is that I experienced a somewhat unexpected but not surprising loss in my life. And I gave myself a little space to both deal with that and navigate life looking through a little bit of a different lens. And some of you are aware that I lost my dad in late June. So I decided that I needed a little bit of time to readjust to life as it would look like without my dad in my day-to-day consciousness in the same way, because he was there in my mind and in my heart day to day. He still is, but it's not in the same way that it had been, of course. So, this is a different thing for me than, for example, I lost my mother 21 years ago, a very different kind of pause. And yet I could say that there was a pause then too. I think about how we navigate grief. Everybody has their own way, but I want to share with you how I've been looking at it, because I have a lot of gratitude for grief in that when I have been going through, let's say, the heights of grief, I think about how it has a life of its own. And there's a way in which if you allow yourself to not try to control it, but let it kind of ebb and flow, it'll take you where you need to go. There's a process that I think we need to go through to allow ourselves to be able to then continue to move forward in life as well. So, the benefits of taking that pause was really a lot of learning. It still is a lot of learning. I learned that taking a pause wasn't an ending. It actually opened me up to some things. It actually enabled me to just tell myself, you know what? I don't have to push through everything that I'm doing. I can still provide a lot of value and send really positive messages to all of you at the same time without having it to be on a hard and fast schedule. But I think that having dealt with this somewhat unexpected yet not surprising loss, I realized that, when you look back at somebody who you've loved and cared about and who's had such a amazing impact on your life, there's a way in which you can appreciate just the example of a life well lived. And I am determined to continue to make my life well lived. And I hope that those of you listening will gain some benefit from that, because my goal in life, my mission in life, is to spread good ideas, good energy, and help you to find your best livelihoods and for you to come into your own if you haven't already, or to reinvent yourself in a way that leaves you feeling like you're living your best life. After all, we're here for a reason, aren't we? And so I hope that lands for you. And I also want to say, though, that when we've had things happen in our lives that are somewhat unexpected, even when it could be a horrible thing that's happened, it gives us another lens to look through. And I was thinking back to a few of my past podcast episodes, and some of the individuals I'm thinking of were also people whose stories I wrote about in my book, Work from the Inside Out. I was reflecting on Michael O'Brien's story in episode 6, and Michael had been out for a bike ride one day, and he got hit by an SUV out on a bike ride, and it was a life-threatening accident, and his recovery was long and grueling. And in fact, even to this day, he still has to engage in activities that fuel his recovery. But he has done amazing things with his life since then. And without having experienced that accident, there are things he wouldn't have done with his life that he has done. And he's had a huge impact on so many people, including me. And episode 35, Luis Velasquez. Luis is a friend and colleague of mine who earlier in his life had immigrated to this country from Central America and got an education here. His PhD, became a professor and a scientist, and then got a brain tumor. And that changed everything. It changed his cognitive abilities. It changed his personal life. And he had to reinvent everything. Fortunately, he was able to do so. And he has since written a book about resilience, and he's doing amazing things now as an executive coach. I want to also mention Jenny Lisk, episode 113. Jenny's been a huge influence on my life in so many ways, but I find it noteworthy, beyond noteworthy, because she was instrumental in helping me get my book out into the world. Jenny was a mother of 2 young children, married to a man who ended up with a brain tumor. And the diagnosis came in, and he was on the operating table within a day. And that changed his cognitive abilities. And so within a day, she didn't have the same person in her life that she knew as her husband. 8 months later, they lost him. So that was an incredible, heartbreaking journey that she went through. She has since written a book about it and done a tremendous amount of work trying to help other widowed parents recover and regain their lives as a result. She also is working with a lot of nonfiction authors and helping them get their books and their messages out into the world. So I look at all these people whose lives have touched mine, and I get to touch theirs. And I think, wow, we've all had to take pauses, each in our own way. And yet we've been able to move on from those pauses and make amazing impacts from there. So I want to say to you, take a pause if you need to. It'll do you a lot of good. Thanks for listening to this solo episode of Work from the Inside Out. What is your key takeaway from today's briefer podcast? If you are interested in any of the resources mentioned here, you can find them in the show notes on my website at www.tammygoularloeb.com/podcast. Just look for episode 281. And while you're there, you can also subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes. Did you know that ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts can help this podcast reach more people? Please help them by clicking on the Apple Podcasts button on the podcast page of my website and offer your honest rating and brief review. Your review will help boost the podcast's reach to inspire more people to move their careers in meaningful directions. Are you contemplating your next professional move? Check out my award-winning book, Work from the Inside Out: Break Through 9 Common Obstacles and Design a Career that Fulfills You. It's available through my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, or through your public library. You can also help sustain this podcast by buying me a cup of coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TammyGL. Since this podcast is self-funded, your support is acknowledged and appreciated. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.